Work was too stressful, too demanding. I could feel myself breaking, and the sounds of the city became too much to bear. I was applying for online jobs left and right because I just couldn't deal with people anymore. I remember wishing I could just get away from it all. My dad told me numerous times I could move back home, but in my mind that felt too much like failure. One day things seemed to suddenly align. I got an email from an internet company saying they'd love to have me as an online technician right at that time. I also got an email from one of the real estate websites I'd been on about a cabin for sale. It was 3 hours away, but it looked perfect. It was just me and my cat, Biscuits, and we didn't need a lot of space. It was 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and the owner only wanted $25,000. Maybe that should have been my sign, but I was desperate to get away. It was remote, but not so remote that you couldn't get internet or cable. It was also fully furnished, so I called the number provided immediately. "Hello," the owner answered. Hi, are you the one with the cabin for sale?" I asked eagerly. "Yes, this is Matt Wigley. I'm selling the cabin. Do you want it?" he asked. At the time I hadn't noticed the desperation in his voice. "I really do." "How soon could I move in?" I asked. "As soon as you like. I'm not living there currently," he said. "Well, should we meet somewhere to sign paperwork or anything?" I asked. "Ma'am, you could bring all your things and move in now if you want. I'll meet you there with the paperwork as long as you've got the money," he said. I assumed I was the only one who'd called about the place, and that was why Matt was so ready to sell, but either way I jumped on the deal. "I think I can have all my affairs in order and my things packed up by the end of the week. Is that all right?" I asked. "That's great. I'll see you Sunday then, miss." Well, I don't even know your name," he said. "It's Kelly Dumont," I replied. "Well, see you then, Miss Dumont," he replied before hanging up. The move wouldn't be hard. I had a 4Runner, so most of my things would fit in it. All of the furniture in my apartment came with, so I couldn't take it, but that wasn't an issue. I had gotten the email about the cabin Monday, so on Tuesday I let my boss know I'd be quitting at the end of the week. He begged me to stay, said some things about how valuable I was, but I told him I couldn't handle the stress. The week flew by after that. Throughout the week I packed things as I could. Early Sunday morning I loaded the last few items I needed and we hit the road. The trip was pleasant. I stopped twice for restroom breaks and went through the drive-thru at McDonald's. By 12:30 p.m. I reached the cabin. It was a good way off the road, and when I pulled up to it, Matt was waiting for me in a blue pickup truck. When he realized I was here, he got out and stood outside his truck. He was tall and lanky with sharp features, glasses, and sandy brown hair. I could see he had a folder in his hand. I got out, my cat carrier in hand, and he greeted me. I hadn't noticed from my car how tired he looked. "You must be Kelly," he said, extending a hand to me. "That's me. And you're Matt?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. I've got all the paperwork." "Is that a cat?" he asked. "Yeah, this is Biscuits." "Actually, before I sign that, do you mind if I take him inside? He's been cramped in here most of the ride," I asked. "Sure. Here's the key. I'll just wait out here," he said. Part of me had wanted to ask for help bringing Biscuits in so I could also grab his litter box, food, and his bowls, but Matt seemed uncomfortable, so I didn't bother. I first took Biscuits and then went back for his things. When I let him out of his carrier, he promptly went and hid under the bed. I chalked it up to him being in a new place since he was never a skittish cat. "Alrighty, sorry about that. I just felt bad about keeping him in there. He's never been on a trip this long," I said. "Here's the paperwork. I think you'll find everything is in order," he said. I checked it out, and then signed it before handing him the check I was using to buy the house and apparently 4 acres of surrounding land. I didn't realize I'd be getting a good bit of land too. "It's really a steal," I said. "Well, it's all yours now. I hate to make it short, but my wife is waiting at home. She's pregnant and hasn't been feeling well lately," he said. "If either of you need anything, you know where to find me," I told him. "Trust me, Kelly, by taking this property off our hands, you've done more than you know," he replied before getting in his truck. The comment stuck me as odd, but maybe they were simply trying to get it off of their hands before the baby came. One less thing to worry about. In the meantime, I started moving all of my things into the house. It took some time, and before I knew it, it was 4:30. Before moving to the cabin, I'd done a bit of research. The closest grocery store was about 10 minutes away in the actual town. It was a very small town called Parsons. From the pictures I'd seen online, it looked very quaint. "All right, Biscuits, I'm going into town. I won't be long," I said before closing and locking the door. He still hadn't come from under the bed, but while at the store I planned on buying him these salmon-flavored treats he liked to coax him out. The store was called Jitney Jungle. and I'd never seen one before in the city. When I went inside, it looked like it would have everything I needed. The closest Walmart was 45 minutes away, and I didn't feel like making that trip today. I went ahead and bought myself a week's worth of groceries along with other odds and ends, and the treats for biscuits, of course. The store seemed to employ most of the town's teenagers. A girl whose name tag read Courtney began ringing up my groceries while a boy named Tyler bagged them. "You're new in town, huh?" she asked. "Brand new," I replied. "That's cool," Tyler replied. "For sure. Always nice to have a new neighbor. Where you living?" "I know a few houses have been for sale here lately. Several folks wanting to move to the city for work or like the beach or something to retire," Courtney said. "I'd rather die than live in the city," Tyler added. They were awfully chatty for two teenagers, but I assumed just curious. Not likely that much happened in Parsons. "I actually moved here from the city. I was tired of all the noise. I just moved into this little cabin on the edge of town," I said. They both exchanged a glance. "Not Matt Whitley's old place?" Courtney asked. "Yeah, it is actually," I said. "I wouldn't want to live there either," Tyler said. "Why not?" "It's a nice little cabin," I asked, genuinely confused. "Now, stop, Tyler. You know that's all rumors and like urban legend stuff," Courtney said. "Yeah, I guess," he said with a shrug. "You enjoy your new house and don't worry about nothing. That'll be $85.50, she said. Tyler carried my groceries out for me, putting them into the back of my 4Runner. I tipped him, and before he went back into the store he told me, "Look ma'am, I'm not trying to scare you," and Courtney could be totally right, but from what I've heard, some weird stuff has happened in that cabin, so just be careful. "What kind of weird stuff?" I asked against my better judgment. "People seeing ghosts, going crazy, murders happening there, things like that," he replied before walking off. What a great bit of information to learn about my new home. It's a small town. They've got to have something exciting to talk about. I mean, in the city we had a house with the same rumors and it never actually amounted to anything. It's just something to talk about, I rationalized to myself on the drive home. When I got home, I got biscuits from under the bed with the treats and showed him around the place. "See, buddy, nothing to worry about," I told him while he purred in my arms. I sat him on the couch while I warmed up a can of beef stew for myself, something savory and quick. After eating, I was so tired, I went straight to bed. My room was at the back of the house. One of the walls was glass from top to bottom, giving me a nice view of the surrounding forest. As I drifted off to sleep, it began to rain. My second day in the house, I'd nearly forgotten all about what Tyler had said about my cabin. I kept myself busy. First, I called about getting internet. I chose the company I'd be working for, of course, and luckily being an employee meant you could get priority installment. The installation tech would be there first thing tomorrow. After making that call, I made myself some coffee and breakfast, which also gave me the opportunity to put my dishes and cookware where I wanted. In the middle of my second cup of coffee, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I was met by a woman with wavy blonde hair and bright green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked like the adult version of the girl, Courtney, that I'd met at Jitney Jungle. "Hi, I'm Celeste Rogers, Courtney's mom. She told me we had a new neighbor, so I thought I'd be neighborly and bring this chocolate pie over. I do hope you like chocolate," she said, holding out the pie. "I love chocolate, thank you. This is very kind of you. I'm Kelly Dumont. Would you like to come in?" I asked. "Sure, I can visit for a few," she said. Her not being reluctant about coming inside made me feel good, considering what I'd been told about the house. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked as she sat at the island bar. "I'd love some, thanks," she said. "So we're neighbors?" I asked. "I'm the closest neighbor you have anyway. I'm about 2 miles up the road. This place is much nicer than I expected. I've never been inside before. We vacationed a lot over the summer and never got the chance to meet Matt and Nicole," she said. "I've only met him, but he said that his wife was pregnant and not feeling well lately. Hopefully she's feeling better," I replied. "I don't know how much better she could feel considering what happened," said Celeste while sipping her coffee. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Oh honey, he didn't tell you why they sold the house. Everyone around here knows," she said. I stared at her blankly. "Well, it's terrible really, but you have the right to know since you're living here now. Nicole wanted to move here when she found out she was pregnant to be closer to her parents. This was the first place they found, and Nicole was about 6 months pregnant. Anyway, rumor has it not long after they moved and Matt started seeing his father, which was not good in the least," she said. "Why? What's wrong with his father?" I asked curiously. Celeste looked over the top of her glasses and said, "Well, anytime you see someone who's dead, that's not a good thing. The story with that is when Matt was around 8, his mother was pregnant with his little brother. It's not really known why, but one day his father comes home and kills his pregnant mother. Of course, this also killed the baby. Then he kills himself. I would say it was simply luck that Matt was at a friend's, but I mean, how lucky is it having your entire family die in one day? You know what I mean? She asked rhetorically. I nodded somberly. Well, apparently 2 weeks after moving in, he starts seeing his dad. Then his dad starts trying to coax him into killing Nicole and the baby. She had to call the police one day because he was in the laundry room with a rifle, sobbing and talking about he didn't want to do it and to leave him alone. They'd only lived here about 2 weeks. That night she left and he was taken into a nearby mental institution for evaluation. Since getting out of this house, though, he's been totally fine, she finished. And they're back together now? I asked incredulously. They're still married but living separately. She's terrified, and I mean, who wouldn't be? She's staying with her parents and he's bought them a new house he's staying in. I don't think she will go back to him after all of that, she replied. Don't say I blame her. It's kind of crazy to blame homicidal ideation on a house, I said with a nervous laugh. Well, that's not the first odd thing that's happened here, but I'm not one to buy into tall tales. I think just a lot of troubled people have lived here, and it's given the house a bad rep, she said. Yeah, I'm sure you're right, I replied. After that we made small talk. Apparently she was a stay-at-home mom of 4, 2 girls and 2 boys. Her husband owned the Jitney Jungle. I told her about my new job and why I moved to Parsons. By the time she left, it was lunchtime. I made myself a grilled chicken salad and relaxed a bit. The place was starting to look more me as I added my things to it. I finally started to feel happy with my new home. Celeste was right, I'm about the house, and decided to think no more of the strange events that lead the Whitleys to sell it. That night I decided on an early night. The move had thoroughly exhausted me. I showered around, then went straight to bed. It didn't take long at all for me to fall asleep. It was some of the best sleep I'd had in a long time until around 3 a.m. I woke up to Biscuits hissing loudly over by the windowed wall, hair standing all over his body. Biscuits was a chill cat, just to let it be known. He'd never behaved this way since I got him when he was just a kitten. I sat up and called to him, but he only stood there, hissing, becoming more upset. I couldn't see anything on the other side of the window, so I didn't understand. Hey, what's wrong? I asked as I went over to him. When I tried to touch him, he whipped around and bit my hand so hard that it left puncture marks. Biscuits, what the hell? I shrieked with tears in my eyes. He ran under the bed, still growling. I went to my bathroom and found some peroxide, antibiotic cream, and bandage wrap to tend to my hand. When I was done, I went back to the windowed wall and took a second look. I still saw nothing. After all of that excitement, I couldn't go back to sleep, so I decided to make myself some tea. I grabbed my housecoat and headed to the kitchen. I gingerly put the kettle on, minding my hand. I still couldn't believe Biscuits bit me. While waiting for my tea to boil, I thought I'd heard soft knocking on the door. No, surely not, I mumbled. The kettle began to whistle. I fixed my cup of tea, then sat at the bar. I picked up my cup and then I heard the soft knocking again. Who even? I start when the soft knocking began to get louder, before turning into full-blown banging. My teacup went crashing to the floor. The banging began to rattle the whole door. I made my way over to the door to look through the peephole. I touched the knob, bracing myself, when the banging stopping. I thought I heard crying. With my breath coming in short rasps, I looked through the peephole to see no one was there. I thought of calling someone. Maybe my dad or even Celeste, who had exchanged numbers with me before leaving yesterday. Just in case you ever need anything, since I'm right up the road, she had said. But it was 3:30 a.m., and what would I say? Someone was banging on my door, and then they weren't. I know my dad. He'd want to make the trip to come check things out, and I'm sure Celeste would either think I was crazy or tell me to call the police. The whole ordeal made me feel crazy. I'm just spooked after what happened with Biscuits, I told myself. I couldn't explain the banging on the door, though. I went around the house making sure each door and window were locked before curling up on the couch. I put on some home design show and tried to pay attention. I must have dozed off sometime because I woke up to knocking on my door, which unsurprisingly scared the crap out of me. I went to look, and this time I found the internet tech waiting for me. I wrapped my housecoat around me tightly before letting him in. Good morning. I'm Jeff and I'm here to install some Wi-Fi for you, he said cheerily. Hello. I hope you weren't knocking long. I had my sleep disrupted last night, and I'm not sure when I dozed back off, I told him with a yawn. Oh, that's no good. I wasn't knocking long at all though, so don't worry, ma'am, he replied. You can call me Kelly. I'm about to put the coffee pot on, Jeff, then change real quick. Help yourself to the coffee if you'd like some, I said before heading to my room. I first went to use the bathroom. When I went to the sink to wash my hands and saw myself in the mirror, I looked like hell. I washed my face up, brushed my teeth and hair, and that helped a little. Didn't hide the dark circles under my eyes, but I couldn't be bothered with makeup right then. I changed my bandaging, then realized I needed more wraps, so after Jeff left, I'd have to head back to the jitney jungle. I threw on a t-shirt, hoodie, and some sweatpants along with my woolly socks. I had quite the chill that morning. I checked under my bed to see Biscuits was still there. "Are you all right, buddy?" I asked. He meowed softly but wouldn't come to me. His behavior was concerning, so I decided to look up veterinarians in the area while I had my coffee. I checked and there was one local vet, Dr. Martin, and more in the town over. I decided to text Celeste and ask her opinion, her being local and all. "Dr. Martin is the best veterinarian in the surrounding area, so you can't go wrong trying to get an appointment with him," she replied promptly. I told her thanks and called his office. "Parsons Animal Clinic, may I help you?" The receptionist answered. I told her the situation and she let me know it was likely stress from the move, but it wouldn't hurt to have him checked out. I made an appointment for 4:30 that afternoon. I sipped my coffee and resigned that I'd do much of nothing the rest of the day until having to go to the vet in the store. I was so exhausted that I'd really like to still be sleeping, but that would have to wait too. I was glad I wouldn't be starting my new job until the next week. I sat there wrecking my brain about what had happened in the early hours of the morning. What had set Biscuits off like that? Who was banging on my door? Was it all a dream? The bite marks on my hand determined that it was real. It was eerie and it was making me feel unsure of myself. I decided on a few pieces of butter sugar toast for breakfast and offered some to Jeff while he worked. "No thank you, Miss Kelly. I grabbed a bite on the way over here. Wouldn't mind some of that coffee though, Black," he said. I brought him a cup and he noticed my bandaged hand. "What happened there?" he asked. "Oh, well, my cat bit me pretty badly last night. That's what woke me in the middle of the night." He was standing by that windowed wall back there hissing and growling. When I tried to touch him, he snapped at me, which has never happened before. He's still hiding under my bed. "I have him a checkup at the vet scheduled later just to make sure he's all right," I said. You just moved here, right?" he asked. "Yeah, from the city," I said. He probably saw something out there he's not used to. Maybe a deer or even a bobcat, and it just spooked him. "A checkup doesn't hurt at all, of course, just trying to be optimistic, you know," he said. "Yeah, I'm doing the same. It's just startling because he's never behaved this way before," I said. "Well, hopefully everything checks out at the vet and he will be all right," Jeff replied. "Thanks," I told him. He was working in the spare room, which would be my office. I assume Matt and his wife had intended it to be their baby's room since it was the only room in the house left barren. I had office furniture on the way that would be there by the end of the week for it, along with a new laptop. Mine conveniently stopped working right before I moved. By lunchtime, Jeff was done and on his way. It was nice to have some Wi-Fi now, I thought, because it made my phone work much faster. Soon after connecting, I got a FaceTime call from my dad. It was nice seeing a familiar, friendly face. "Hey girlie, I've been trying to call you," he said. "I'm sorry, Dad. The service out here at the cabin isn't the greatest. I just got my Wi-Fi hooked up. When I go to Walmart this weekend for the rest of my office supplies, I'm going to get one of those cheap home phone plans. I'll need it for work anyway, but it will be easier for you to get in touch as well," I told him. "That will be good. So how's the move been?" he asked. I gave him a virtual tour of the house, then filled him in on everything. Since I was young, my dad had been my best friend. My mom wasn't always the best mother and quite unstable. When they split up, he tried to get custody of me, but was unable to until after she passed away when I was 6. "Are you sure you're comfortable living there, Kelly? Sounds like a creepy place, honestly, and you should have called the police," he said. "I think it'll be fine, Dad. I didn't want to call them with the house's history and all. I didn't want to come across unstable," I told him. "Well, you know you can always come home if need be. I know you're a 26-year-old adult, but there's no shame in coming home if you need to or even if you just want to," he said. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said. Dad owned his own small construction company and chatted with me through his lunch break. Although he was the boss, he was very hands-on. When we finished our call, I ate a sandwich for lunch, then checked my emails. My office furniture has been shipped and was on the way, thankfully. Around 3, I decided to start trying to get Biscuits from under the bed. I brought the carrier to the edge of the bed and he ran right into it. "Good boy, Biscuits," I told him. I carefully filled the food tray with some cat chow and water, which he didn't touch until I carefully loaded him in my car. I decided to stop at Jitney Jungle before his appointment since it was on my way to the vet's office. It was a cool day, so Biscuits would be okay in the car with the windows cracked. He seemed more content than he had been all week anyway. He was in his carrier purring. I grabbed the bandage wrap, and on the way to the front some Cheez-Its and strawberry watermelon body armor caught my eye, so I grabbed those too. Courtney and Tyler were both working again that afternoon. "What happened to your hand?" Courtney asked, eyebrows furrowed. "Oh, my cat got spooked the other night and bit me. I've got him in my car now actually to take him to Dr. Martin for a checkup. He's been behaving strangely," I said. Tyler mumbled. "Well, you get well soon, Ms. Dumont," Courtney said while handing me my change. "Thanks," I replied. The vet visit went as expected. Biscuits was perfectly healthy, though a little dehydrated from hiding under the bed so long. Dr. Martin was very nice and told me to just give Biscuits a little time to adjust to his new home. When we got back home, my front door was wide open. This time I called the police because no one could deny the door was open when it should be closed. I locked it. I know I did. Within 5 minutes of me calling the sheriff's station, a car pulled up. I had sat there the whole time with my doors locked on my car, watching, trying to see if I saw anyone inside the house, but I didn't. I nearly jumped out of my skin when the police officer tapped on my window. "Miss Dumont, I'm Officer Thomas Waits, and this is my partner Derek Robbins. What's going on here?" he asked calmly. "Well, I left to go into town. My cat, Biscuits, he's been acting strangely. He bit me, see," I said, holding up my hand. "I went to the jitney jungle for more bandage wrap, then took him to Dr. Martin's for a checkup. I swear before I left my house I not only closed, but locked my front door, and when we pulled up it was like that." I finished, pointing to the door. "All right then, Miss Dumont. You roll the window back up and keep your doors locked while we go inside to have a look around, all right?" he said assuringly. I nodded before sitting there watching them go in my house with their guns drawn. Maybe moving here was a mistake, I said to myself with a sigh. Biscuits let out a forlorn meow that only made me feel worse. Soon the officers came out with their guns holstered. They had no one else with them. When they approached, I rolled my window down. "Miss Dumont, we checked everywhere, but there's no one in there. It's safe to go inside if you like. Has anything else like this happened while you've been here?" asked Officer Waits. "Well, I didn't want to call before with the house's history and all. I didn't want to come across. Well, anyway, early this morning I woke up to my cat growling at the windowed wall. That's when he bit me. After I cleaned my hand up, I was pretty unsettled, so I got up to make myself some tea. Not much later, someone was banging on my door pretty violently," I said. Just recounting the details gave me chills. "Miss Dumont, regardless of the house's history, we take the safety of our citizens seriously in Parsons, and we respect people's privacy. Officer Robbins and I aren't going to go around town talking about how we came out here for a B&E but nothing turned up, so that Dumont lady must be crazy. This is serious, and not to scare you, but it sounds like you may have a stalker. You have any enemies?" he asked. I wouldn't say so. I kept to myself in the city, did my job, then went home. Had very few friends. The only ex I ever had died in a car accident on the way to our rehearsal dinner, I told him. Losing William wasn't something I usually spoke about, but I knew they'd ask about exes if I didn't mention any, plus I didn't feel myself as is. "All right, Miss Dumont. If you have any more of these disturbances, please don't hesitate, call the sheriff's department again," Officer Robbins said. I thanked them both before they headed off. I didn't feel any better about the situation after they left, but I decided that tonight I'd go, and then in the morning I'd sort out what I wanted to do. Maybe an alarm system would bring me comfort. I wasn't sure. I was so exhausted after everything that had happened that day I went straight to bed. Everything else could wait till morning. Surprisingly, Biscuits curled up next to me like he used to when we lived in the city. It was really nice. I gently petted him until I drifted off to sleep. At some point in the night I awoke to an odd sound. I was so tired that when it woke me, I felt confused. Biscuits had gotten under the cover, but he was still beside me. As my senses came about, I heard thunder clap loudly, shaking the cabin as rain pelted against the window wall. Then I realized it sounded like something wet moving around on the floor. My heart was pounding. I looked to my right and saw watery footprints. When I turned to my left, lightning flashed, illuminating the entire room. What I saw took my breath away. There stood my mother, dripping with water from head to toe. "You're not. You're dead," I shouted hysterically. "I miss you, Kelly. Come with me," she said. She sounded as if she was underwater. "No," I screamed. I grabbed Biscuits and ran wildly from the cabin, only stopping briefly to grab my keys. I went out into the storm without a coat or even shoes and hopped in my car. Biscuits went and hid under the back seat. I shouldn't have been driving, seeing that I was in full hysterics. I hadn't even grabbed my phone and I didn't know where I was going. Before it was over, I ended up in the jitney jungle parking lot. I couldn't stop shaking from the cold and from the fear. At some point I must have passed out because I awoke to Celeste banging on my window. I rolled it down and she immediately began fussing over me. "Oh my God, Kelly, I thought you were dead in there. I was so scared. What are you doing here?" she said frantically. I shook my head. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I said. "Let me take you home at least," she said. "No, I can't go back there," I stammered. She fussed and insisted until I let her take biscuits and me back to her place after that. I was chilled to the bone from getting wet the night before, then sleeping in my car. "Everything will be okay. When we get there I'll get you some clothes and you can have a hot shower. I take up collections for the local charity shop. I have all size clothes laying around because of that. I've been meaning to take them but haven't yet, so there will be something for you and it's brand new. I'll make you some hot tea too," she said. What she was saying was all running together. It was all very kind, but I was already feeling sickly from what I've been through. When we got there she immediately got me some clothes and ushered me to the bathroom. She took biscuits to get him something to eat. They had a cat also, Nessa, that biscuits got along with surprisingly well. The shower felt amazing, but every little sound put me on edge, so I hurriedly got done. The sweatsuit and fuzzy socks Celeste gave me kept me warm as I exited the bathroom. "That better?" Celeste asked. I nodded. She motioned for me to sit at the bar as she poured me a cup of hot tea. "You want to talk about it now?" she asked. "I guess," I replied. She waited patiently. "You're going to think I'm insane, just like Matt," I told her. "I'm not here to judge you. Clearly you've been through an ordeal, Kelly," she said. "That's a nice picture," I said, noticing a picture of her family on the fridge. She took it down. "That's my husband, Conrad. You've met Courtney. She's our oldest. These are our twin sons, Carson and Callum. They're 14. This is little Caroline. She was a sweet surprise and is 3. Her daddy took her this morning after we saw you at the store," she said. "Last night I saw my mother in the cabin. Woke up to her standing in front of the windowed wall," I said. "Did she break in? Or did she have a key and come in and give you a fright?" she asked. "You don't understand. My mother died when I was 6. She flung herself into the sea while I was sleeping one night. She was always really unstable and depressed. My father tried to get me when they divorced, but you know most judges won't take a child from their mother. We lived in the coastal town that I don't even remember the name of, but she kept the lighthouse. It was up on a cliff above the sea. She put me to bed that night and was more loving than I ever remember her being. When I woke up the next morning I couldn't find her, so I called my dad. He found the note," I said. "So she's dead. But you saw her last night?" Celeste asked. "I know how it sounds. She said she missed me and asked me to come with her. I know you said you didn't believe, but there's something wrong with that cabin. I can't go back. I need to call my dad to come get me," I told her. "Well, I don't think you're insane, Kelly. I don't think you'd make something like this up. From the moment we met I've considered you a reasonable person and a good person too," she said. "Thanks, that means a lot," I replied. "You can stay in the guest room until you get things sorted. I have more clothes." "Courtney, why are you lurking around?" she asked suddenly. "Sorry, I couldn't help but hear what you were talking about, and I think I know why that cabin has issues," Courtney said. "What on earth are you talking about?" Celeste asked her. "Well, I assumed you'd heard the story about the original owners of the place, right, Mom?" she asked. "No, I can't say that I have, Courtney. This town has loads of history, but I've never thought to seek out any about that place," she replied. At this point I was all ears. "Well, it's rumored like forever ago, when the town was first founded, there was this man, Joseph something or another, that was this huge occultist, and he lived on the same land that cabin is on. It started out with him doing seances for the town's people. They really believed in him. Like, he started to gain followers when things took a dark turn. Devil worship, demons, sacrifices, all of that. You know, way back when people were highly religious, so they went and gathered up Joseph and all his followers. They burned them on stakes out there on that land. It's said even as he burned, Joseph laughed wickedly. Ever since then, anyone who's lived on that land has had experience, some of which lead to the deaths of themselves or others. The rumor behind that is that Joseph cursed the land and he's still taking sacrifices for Satan or whatever," she finished. "Where on earth did you hear that?" Celeste asked. "Tyler. Supposedly he's a direct descendant of this Joseph, but he doesn't go around telling everyone," she said with a shrug. "It kind of makes sense in a twisted way. I can't let anyone else live there. I think I'll bulldoze the cabin and just fence off the land. I can't let this keep happening," I said. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. Celeste kindly let me and Biscuit stay with her family until the next day when my dad could come collect us. He helped me pack quickly, and his construction company dealt with the demolition and putting a fence around the property line. I took up my dad's offer and moved in with him. It was much more peaceful than my short time in the cabin. I was able to start my new job soon after moving in as well and very much enjoyed it. My life finally felt like it was getting back to normal, and I was so thankful for that. Celeste and I stayed in touch after I moved. After reflecting on what happened, we theorized that the cabin and the land attracted people who had experienced great personal tragedy, leading them to be more susceptible to the curse attached to the place. The normalcy didn't really last. Although I'd escaped the cabin, I still had nightmares about that night my mother came to me, and I get strong urges to go back to the land. For the time being, I've been able to ignore those urges, but it truly does call to me. In the middle of the night, when I'm lying in the safety of my bed in my dad's house, I hear a man's voice whispering, then slowly raising into hysterical laughter.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay tuned for more true stories.